Live here in South Dakota. This is the Dr. Boz Channel, and it is Sunday night. We have, I hope, a good show for you. I am definitely in my most vulnerable part of a fast, so I will try not to get growly on camera. But we're going to talk about why am I fasting early this week, and a few tips and tricks that I've been using to get through my fast. I think it's authentic to show you what happens when I fast, when I get to the part that's the hardest for me, and how that landed on Sunday at 6 o'clock instead of starting Sunday at 6 o'clock, or at least Sunday afternoon. The other parts that I wanted to do is I have some updates for folks that I'm really thankful to talk about. But we are going to do what we always do and start by checking numbers. But I am 48 hours fasted, so this should be I don't know, it's actually a little bit risky for me to always do this live. I probably should have checked it right before I started, but yeah, didn't do that. All right, so I am going to prick my finger and check both ketones and glucose. And as I do that, it is, again, so now it's actually 49 hours since I've eaten last. And I am going to start with my ketones. And the ketones have a purple strip. They take 10 seconds to count down. And while that's added, this is the white strip, and it's got the little piece of blood, or little drip of blood saying we're ready. And we will add the ketones, or add the glucose. So we've got glucose counting down, ketones at 1.4, so 78, 1.4, and that's 48 hours into the fast. And this is my worst part of a fast. So we are going to get through the next hour, and during that hour I was going to show you a couple of things that I don't often get a chance to do. I am going to actually do the live chat next to me just to see how everybody's doing and making sure it is all flowing like it's supposed to. There we go. Yeah, it is. Good deal. All right, so I just want to make sure it looks like I'm topping out on the sound here, so I'm going to turn it down just a hint, just so it doesn't peak out like that. Don't do that. Okay, Jack says don't do that. Okay, so let's try that, see how you feel, see how that sounds. All right, so this week, instead of drinking my BHB, I often on the show will have a scoop of something, and the ketones in a can are something that I don't use nearly as much as I used to when I was really getting better at fasting, trying to practice saying no to food. So I learned that if I had a struggle during my fast, if I would add some ketones, I could get through whatever was going on, whether it was a craving, whether it was me just being whiny and wanting food, or if I really did need to, emphasize or improve brain power, trying to concentrate, adding some ketones during a fast always helped me. If I was in clinic and starting to feel draggy, I could quickly add ketones within about 15 minutes, feeling much better. Since I've really practiced fasting every week, to a Dr. Boz ratio of 40 or less has been my goal. Recently, actually 6 weeks ago now, my dad died, and I did the first 72-hour fast. I started the fast on the day that he died. That was actually, I was planning on the fast, but that fast became really a spiritual, transition for me to just dedicate the fast to him. And since then, I've been trying to do a 72-hour fast every week I'm hoping to get to 8 weeks. So this is week 6, I think. And I'm really impressed with what it does to my autophagy ratio, meaning people fast for different reasons. I don't like fasting. I actually do this because it really inspires my patients to see, even when you're healthy, giving a stress to your metabolism, watching it and calculating it really does offer you an advantage. But it doesn't mean I like it. 72-hour fast I really don't like, because that's even longer. But I'm so impressed at how much quicker and how much better my numbers have gotten over those 6 weeks. And the last time I did this, I was impressed. I tell patients how this works, and of course it works for them. But I don't know, somehow doing it myself reminds me, okay, Yes, this is actually a really good idea, but it's stressful. So today, though, I wanted to do something different. That when I do use in my fast, I used to do bone broth all the time. That was harder for me to keep on hand than powder. So when I switched over to doing ketones in a can, it was easy, but it has stevia in it. And most people do not have an insulin response from stevia, but I always tell my patients to check, check, check. The studies that look at stevia not showing the insulin or the glucose to rise after that fake sweetener, the studies were done in healthy, lean people. So if you're insulin resistant and you want to know if you've had diabetes or if you're overweight and you want to know does the stevia in something break your fast or does it shoot your sugars up? For heaven's sakes, just check it. Look at your own sugar 30 minutes after you take the supplement. So I don't have much of an insulin response from that, but I don't like taking stevia. I mean, I take it sometimes, but it's not my favorite thing to do. Instead, I put ketones in a capsule. And so I was going to take 1 dose of these at the beginning of the show and then see what they are at the end of the show. Now, when it comes to capsules, these are the largest capsules you can put on the market. So they're kind of big, but you want to get as much powder in a capsule as possible. It still takes at least 4 capsules to have a dose. And I just want to show you what's going to happen to my ketones at the beginning of the hour versus the end of the hour. So let me quickly take these. Okay, so that the other reason I do ketones in a capsule, or I made ketones in a capsule under the Dr. Boz brand, is because my husband is allergic to stevia and he gets horrifically sick when he has stevia. So that's the only ketones in a can he can take. But it really is another way to just see what happens if you just add ketones. You don't add any extra flavors or powders or anything else that is in the process, and I'll show you what my numbers do in the next half an hour to 45 minutes. The final announcement I want to make before I tell a little bit more about why I'm fasting is I have awesome news that we are back on the market with the keto combo. I will say of all of the supplements I make, this is my favorite because it tastes so good. This one has the MCT, C8, C10 powder, and BHB all in 1 scoop. So for those of you that watch the Dr. Boz show on and on, you know that ketones will rise within about 15 minutes of taking them. Those ketones in a can, they'll rise really quickly. But when you have MCT, it takes a little longer for that fat to get through, absorbed into your circulation and into your liver. Once in your liver starts to make ketones. And that supplement really was one of the key things that helped me. It was probably a year ago now that I went from having 2 meals a day to having 1 meal a day. And the first step that I did to accomplish that was to substitute some of this powder for one of the meals. And I did that for probably 3 weeks before I was able to say, I can do 1 meal a day and really stay at it. What happened during that time is by supplementing routinely, I was able to increase my production of ketones a little bit. And a lot of it was mental. I was ready to say, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. So I really love this supplement. It does use the 2 substances that do augment the production or the presence of ketones in circulation. So I'm super thankful that finally it's back on the market. I just want to put a shout out to Go BHB. I use their branded BHB in that supplement, and it's just very predictable. My patients have really good numbers when they spend the money on something. I want it to work and I want it to be predictable, and that's why Go BHB is in that product. All right, so let's just tell one more story, and that is why am I fasting at 48 hours on a Sunday night. As most of you know, I start fasting usually on Sundays, and then I go till my Dr. Boz ratio is usually 40 or less. Recently, I've been doing this 72-hour fast and watching to see how quickly my ratio comes down, how much that autophagy really, once you practice it a couple of weeks in a row, boy, I can make those numbers look great much faster than I did 2 months ago. But I had someone reach out to me and say, we're going to do a marathon fast. We're going to have a fast for 20 days where each person in the fast was going to have a section of the fast for, whatever that, oopsie daisy, whatever that, I wanted to see if I could make this go to that. So they wanted to, so let's try that again. The marathon was 20 days of fasting, and each person in the marathon had a different segment for the fast. Mine was supposed to start on Friday, and so Friday night is when I said, okay, this is the beginning of my fast, and I said I would try to fast for 4 days, which is a little longer than I usually do. And then Friday came around and I realized, oh, it's not a marathon. Everybody was starting on Friday, and we were supposed to have an accumulated fasting days of 20 days between, I think there's 5 of us on our team. So I don't know what I was thinking to say I'm going to fast over the weekend when I have 5 teenagers around. This summer we have a cousin in town, and we've got our kids and foreign exchange students and just a lot of busyness. So it's not easy to fast when there's kids ordering pizza or events to go to. The busier I get in my practice, it's easy. I can not eat and do pretty well. But you get out in that social world where there's the smell of hot dogs or something, I'm like, what am I thinking? So I get to Sunday, and this is definitely where I get crabby, I get irritable. So when they ordered pizza on Saturday night, I was about 24 hours into it. And again, that's usually a tipping point where I like to be away from temptations during that 24-hour mark. I can usually feel my body step up to produce a few more ketones. If I'm checking, I can totally see it goes from like 0.8 to 1.2. And so it's definitely making a shift. The glucose usually goes from somewhere in the 80s down to lower 70s or maybe even high 60s. And so I, again, removed myself from the situation. I got in the sauna because you can't eat in the sauna, or you shouldn't eat in the sauna. So that really kind of helps me break a sweat and, again, stay away while the pizza was being eaten. And then afterwards I actually took a mud bath, which is something I'll talk about on another show, but it's very curious and interesting. But again, finding a routine that is helpful for distracting or knowing when you're going to have the tough times that you've got something planned to do. I really do stick with salt and black coffee during my fast now. The salt is really the ticket where this went from much more difficult to much easier. I put salt in my coffee. I put salt in a little sole water in my water when I'm fasting. All of those things are supplemented to help me through the fast, and it makes all the difference. Like, I used to think it's just not that big of a deal, and dang, I was wrong. It really does help. So tomorrow night, I'll be at 72 hours around 5 o'clock, and I have planned a massage because I know this is going to be, I'm going to want to eat. I'm going to want to eat tomorrow night. I can tell you that right now. But getting past that, go to bed, get away from the temptation, make it easy, find something you like to do that's better than eating. And so I have a massage scheduled tomorrow night that starts at 5 o'clock, which is when the kids and the family are going to eat supper. And then going to go to bed probably earlier than usual just to stay out of the kitchen. I don't know. Those are some of the things that I like to do. But as you watch the other process that happens during a fast, I really try to pray about something. I really try to meditate on what am I trying to improve, where am I not being as good of a mom or as good of a wife, or where can I work at improving me. And I screw it up just like anybody else, but it has been, besides adding salt, it has been the other major thing that if I look at, was the fast painful? Was it irritable? Was it crabby? Or did I really get through it? And a lot of that is determined on, did I have a reason why I was fasting? Did I put that to purpose during the fast? And when I feel like eating, I remind myself why I'm doing it. So I encourage you, if you're trying to fast, if you're trying to do this, first of all, don't start until you're keto adapted. That's a really big deal that I think anybody that's taken my online course, that is a huge component to the success of fasting is, dang, you really want to be keto adapted to get the benefits of fasting. To go without food is one thing, and praying through it's, very good, practice in cultures throughout the globe. But wow, you get a lot more growth hormone and norepinephrine and autophagy when you've started the fast already in a ketogenic state, which is keto adapted. So, all right, so that's the first half of the show. I wanted to tell you why I was fasting, tell you about we're back on Amazon for my favorite supplement with MCT and BHB in the supplement. And I'm checking my ketones 1 hour or 40 minutes after taking 4 capsules of the ketones in a capsule. So the show I have for you tonight is the map of a ketogenic diet. And I am going to see if I can transition over to this and show you this map. All right, so this is what I like to call the keto continuum. Let's see here. You're going to give me a thumbs up if that looks good. So this map of the keto continuum is something that is the foundation for where I wrote this book that I've been working on. That's been another reason why people say, why did you do the 72-hour fast so many weeks in a row? And the real answer is I really want to finish this book. I'm so close to finishing it that it's painful, actually. So between grieving for my dad, having an extended summer where kids are around, and trying to recover from being in Hawaii for 12 unexpected weeks and finish a book, just a lot of distractions. But I have got to finish this book. So the online course that I put out a few weeks ago was this curriculum. It was practicing the curriculum that's in the book. That I really do think is, when I wrote the book Any Way You Can, it was my first stumble understanding, helping my mother through her cancer journey of how can we use a ketogenic diet to improve her cancer numbers while resurrecting her health. That was 5 years ago though, and I have learned so much about what are the missed steps for a ketogenic diet and what should people be doing if you really want to be ketones for life, which is really my motto. I mean, that really means 2 things, not just ketones until the day you die, but ketones to revive your life. And boy, I can separate as I walk in the room when I see a patient who is in a ketogenic state or who's been practicing ketosis and who hasn't been there yet. And the energy that is in their eyes, in their voice, in the passion for their life is just a different caliber for my ketogenic patients versus those who have yet to step over the threshold. All right, so I'm going to go through this real quick to say this roadmap has a few really important things in it. So I'm going to first begin by showing you this column that is the keto continuum of beginners, baseline, and stressing metabolism. And specifically, what I like you to see is that in a beginner's setting, you start out like everybody else. You're not really testing anything. You're eating whenever you feel hungry. And most people's metabolism has them eating every 2 to 4 hours. Now, the reason I put that, standard American diet as step 1 on the keto continuum is if you've been doing the ketogenic diet, you'll probably fall off. Now, I hope people don't fall all the way back to step 1, but in the event that they do, we start over. We start with the next steps on what it means to be in a ketogenic diet. So some of the other things I like to point out in step 1 is that you are fueled on glucose. That you have to refuel often because you don't burn any ketones. You really have a struggle for keeping energy high enough without getting a hunger or a craving. when you step over the threshold into the ketogenic diet, that is no little threshold. It is actually 20 carbs or less. And when you do that, your chemistry inside your body changes. You'll notice that this strip over here that says test, the one that's yellow, is the urine ketone strips. And at the beginning, I really don't think people need to be doing this. I didn't do that for almost 6 months, 9 months into the ketogenic diet. Those urine ketone strips, or otherwise called ketone strips, are they're great, they're easy, they're cheap, they're safe. You don't have to poke your finger, and they are pretty reliable at this early stage. At this stage of the game, chemistry is what's shifting. For those of you that 20 total carbohydrates or less sounds like a lot of a drop, I would push you to look into that, taking that online course that consistently keto preps people that are what I call in the 200 club. They're taking more than 200 carbohydrates per day. And when they slam down to 20 carbs or less, some gnarly things can happen. And they often can't make it past the first week if they do that. I really spend time going through what you can do to prepare for that, what you should do if it happens, if you run into one of the most common troubles. But it really does begin, ketosis is not a diet, it is a chemistry set. It begins when your ketone strips turn positive. And from this point forward, we want you consistently keto or on the keto continuum because there are ketones in your circulation. That is what the ketogenic diet does. If you want autophagy, if you want the best metabolic health, if you want to find that way to prevent infections from overrunning your body with a cytokine storm, with the problems that we see in folks with chronic insulin, chronically overweight, high blood pressure, that pre-existing conditions for COVID-19. What's the separating factor? They have buckets of insulin and their body is not as prepared for fighting off infections as it would be had they been practicing a state of ketosis for the weeks prior to that. All right, some big highlights for the guidelines. Again, 20 carbs per day, that's total carbs. The key that I really like people to know is that be sure you eat high fat. So many patients start the ketogenic diet and they skip the high fat part. Their brain just cannot get around how valuable it is to add fat in the first step of the ketogenic diet. Without the fat, you skip the chemistry. You cannot resurrect your chemistry. Especially if you're insulin resistant, you've had those 15, 20 pounds on for more than a couple of years, your body is used to not letting fat out of the fat cells. The only fat you get to use for hormones and this chemistry I keep talking about is the fat you eat. And until we get you keto adapted, you have to eat your fat in order to get the benefits of the ketogenic diet. That's a huge mistake that I see folks make. This continues until they accidentally miss a meal. And it's usually one of these remarkable moments where I often jump out of my chair. I'm usually excited for them because it really does mark keto adaptation. That the hormones that shut off your hunger are in a state of ketosis, a chronic state of ketosis. It is one of the things with the supplements that when I'm asking patients to just journey forward, if they can't lift it all, if they can't make all these changes, I don't want them on supplements forever, but I don't want them falling all the way down in the ditch, back into the carb fog. Instead, I like them just, let me give you the supplements. Let me give you the ketones. But that keto adaptation comes when your body is making ketones on a regular basis. You're going to see in a minute that I took these ketones in a capsule, and I'll check my numbers at the end of the show. But it really is nothing of the ketones that my body makes. My body makes 20 times, 30 times, 40 times more ketones than I just swallowed in those 4 little capsules. When I have a scoop of ketone powder, again, I'm making way more ketones from my liver than I ever could take in a supplement. What the supplement does is it sparks that chemistry to shift in the right direction. You should still be checking ketone strips, and it takes you about 4 to 6 weeks to get through these first 4 steps of the keto continuum. I tell patients that the first 3 steps, the chemistry will carry you. As long as you cut those carbs to 20 and you're eating fat, the chemistry really does most of the work. People say, it's easy, I'm keto, I'm doing great, my ketone strips are positive. And they just hang out right there at keto adaptation or keto continuum number 3 at keto adapted. The next step takes a little bit of discipline, and that is where you say, all right, your chemistry is working for you. Now I need you to eat 2 meals per day. And I like people to stay there at least a couple of weeks. 2 meals per day. Do not try to shorten that to 2 days of 2 meals per day. I really like them getting a pattern of what this looks like to have 2 meals a day, as opposed to eating every 6 to 8 hours. And again, number one was eating every 2 to 4 hours, so there's quite a transition in there. Getting the social parts used to eating only 2 meals a day is really weird. So there are several things that you're going to run into, and I like them to stay at keto continuum number 4 until they are successful for at least 10 days. 2 weeks is even better. But again, it's a choice. You're not going to wake up saying, hey, I accidentally ate 2 meals every day. No, you got to really plan that as 2 meals a day. That's what you do. This is a time where I still want them, I want them succeeding 7 consecutive days in a row before they advance. And 10 days to 2 weeks is even better. But then the next place comes that they graduate from being a beginner and they move into what I call the baseline metabolism. Baseline metabolism is a place where people can live. This is your ketones for life. When I look at my first year and a half, I was probably at keto continuum number 5 for most of that year. I put my food into an 8-hour window. My 8-hour window didn't start until around noon, so I was eating pretty late at night. You do the work in this. I did have to really work at not having breakfast. At that time, I still was having my morning coffee drink filled with ketones. So, not ketones, filled with fat. I put heavy cream in my coffee. I put MCT in my coffee. I put butter in my coffee. I did all kinds of things to experiment what did I like in my coffee for the morning. And it worked pretty well until it didn't. At which point there was a come to Jesus moment where I had to clean up my morning drink. And that's the next step. So I like people to be at 16-8 again for a season, enough that you feel stable, that you've tested out your social environment, that this is where I was there for over 6 months. Like, okay, it's good enough for me. I wasn't really looking for weight loss. I really wanted to feel good, and I was doing that at 16-8 with a morning coffee. But there did come a point where I needed to say, I got to raise the bar a little bit. And that's when I moved to baseline number, keto continuum number 6, which is called advanced 16-8. Again, I was still checking urine ketone strips at the time. You can check blood numbers at this point, but it is not mandatory. I start getting mandatory at number 7 with checking blood meters. And some people never need to advance past number 5. They do fine. They do great. But if you're trying to improve your diabetes, to get your immune system stronger, and you cannot get your numbers to improve, you cannot get that morning fasting blood sugar under 100, or I like to hit a fasting sugar of 60s before I quit my 72-hour fast. If you're struggling to get those morning sugars down, to get your liver empty of cortisol, to get your muscle cells, your liver empty of glycogen, your muscle cells empty of glycogen, that's going to be a blood sugar in your 60s. So if you're looking for that and you're not able to do that, that's where I tell them they're going to have to clean up their morning drink. Remove all calories and sweeteners from their morning drink. It means there's no fat, no MCT, no butter, no sweeteners, no calories. The other 16 hours are only salt, water, black coffee, or tea. And I tell them, don't remove the fat from that morning ritual until this phase. I have so many people they'll look at this list and they'll say, well, I'm just never going to put fat in my coffee. I'll just not do that. And what I see happen is they never raise those fat-based hormones. They never get to feel a full satiety because their cholecystokinin, which is made from fat and responds to eating fat, but it sends this message to your brain to say, you're not hungry. And there's about 15 other fat-based hormones that do the same thing right along with cholecystokinin, peptide YY, looking at your response to food that you just don't feel hungry. You can't white knuckle it forever. You really do need hormones on your side. And that's why I say leave the fat in your coffee until you get to keto continuum number 6, which is advanced 16-8. So again, there's still 16 hours of the day where you don't put any chewing. It's the one thing I didn't mention in 5 is if you're a gum chewer, this is where I have you deal with your gum chewing, is that you only chew gum during the 8 hours where you can eat. The rest of the time, you need to not be chewing gum. It's a habit, and it has a trickle to the ditch of falling off the ketogenic diet. It also makes it more difficult to suppress the insulin when you're constantly chewing. It stimulates your pancreas to produce just enough insulin. And if you're insulin resistant, it's actually a lot of insulin they produce. So I need you to shut that chewing off for the 16 hours in the day. You can chew it for the 8 hours in the day, but that's it. So when you get to advanced, then I tell you to take out the fat in your coffee. So again, some people never go past the baseline number 6. Some people stay at baseline number 5. And those that have the best numbers are the ones who say, yeah, I feel great. I feel fine. Why would I do anything more? And the answer is exactly. I wouldn't go any further if you feel that good. But if you need it, if you need to step to the next level, that is what I call 23 in 1. And OMAD is the common acronym for 1 meal a day, but I don't like that. People screw that up all the time. They have one real meal where they sit down and eat, and it is ketogenic, but they have a handful of nuts in the morning. They put fat in their coffee, or they have a handful of nuts at night. They put fat in their coffee in the morning. They have all kinds of places where calories are coming in. You notice that we did not talk about calories when we were up here at this high-fat phase. When you're a beginner, when you're even in that 16-8 for Keto Continuum number 5, we do not talk calories. We are depending on you to have enough fat to resurrect your fat-based hormones. And when you're there, and some of my insulin-resistant patients, this took them 6 months. They screwed it up a little bit. They didn't have enough fat. They kept trying to cut calories before the fat-based hormones were there, and they might have gotten through the first fast, but the second fast, they felt awful. You'll know that you're fat adapted because the next few steps I'm going to talk about aren't terrible. I can be 48 hours since my last snitch of food, and I feel just fine. I feel just fine. I don't feel lightheaded. I don't have a craving. I don't feel, I can say irritable, but it's really not that irritable. But the reason I can do that is I have the hormones that are needed to sustain life without food for a few hours, and they're in high supply. When you've been insulin resistant and you try to march down this keto continuum so quickly, hop to OMAD, 23 in 1, and they just don't get the results that they want. And I'm telling them, you gotta clean up the rest of the time. If you've left salt, specifically, I'm a big fan of red bean salt. You can find that in the links below. If you have not added a mineral-dense salt, which is pink Himalayan, but I'll tell you, I've studied them. Nothing beats red bean salt for how much value you get in a sprinkle of salt. You're gonna have a tough time marching past Keto Continuum number 6 onward without having a really high-quality salt frequently in your journey. I would start you a little sooner than that, and I really do a good job of explaining what that's all about in that course. All right, but you'll notice that the next thing, once they're on 23 in 1, I do like them to, I'll just make sure I say that out loud. All calories and sweeteners are in 1 hour. 23 hours, only salt, water, tea, and coffee. And my gum chewers, now you have 1 hour to chew gum. Yeah, it can be tough. Again, this is where blood checking really does matter. So I push people to say, nah, you really got to step up and check your blood meters here. The next and final metabolism that makes the baseline metabolism is called advanced 23 in 1. And again, you'll see that I divided these 4 through 7 into you do the work. It does take discipline. But if you get down to number 8, you're going to need some advanced psychology. You're going to need the self-talk or at least a support group. I really recommend a support group from 8 onward that says to you the things you're going to need to hear when you feel like, I just can't do this. But the psychology involved with the next few steps, it really is a huge part of the successful process of being ketones for life. And that is, there's a lot of self-talk that goes on that you cover up with eating. The thoughts and the time you spend scheduling food is amazing to me. And I used to do it just like you, so it's weird, but the energy put into focusing on what did you last eat, when are you going to eat next, what's your next menu, is the fridge full of this, and that constant noise in your head, when you take it away, it's why the meditation part of fasting becomes a big subtext of successful ketogenic doers for life, ketonians, whatever the word is we use these days. All right, I want to show you something though. So advanced 23-1 is now you move the 1 hour that you eat into the daylight hours. I like to say 11 hours following sunrise, and I like it to be a little earlier than that. We don't want you eating late at night. So if the sun is up at 6 o'clock in the morning, we want you done eating by 5 o'clock. If the sun is up by 6:30 or 7, we definitely want you done eating by 6 o'clock. And what you're doing is, as you put that food earlier in the day, you closer match your cortisol rise, which does release the glycogen that's in your liver, that's in your muscles, and that glucose floods your blood. So when you show up with a morning fasting glucose that's so stinking high you can't figure out where it's coming from, I'm telling you, you still haven't emptied the glycogen, or you have so much glycogen that you churn. If you fast until you get those glucoses into the 65 and then you eat again, you quickly fill up that glycogen because you've got so much history with high insulin. That is reset when you stop stimulating it so much. So the reason we move 23-1 earlier in the day is we want it to closer match that cortisol burst of glucose that happens with every sunrise. It's going to happen whether or not you sleep in or not. That sunrise isn't something you actually have to see. It's your brain's signal of being in sync with the sun. And even the night shift workers still have a morning glucose rise because of their cortisol rise that is synced with the sunrise. We want that meal closer to sunrise. Now, I don't tell you got to keep it before noon, but I do have some patients that is where we've ended up saying, I really need you to not eat after noon. You're going to have that meal first thing in the morning. You need to eat to satiety. You have to eat until you feel full. But for now, that needs to happen before noon hour. I don't put that in this official rule book. I usually use that for somebody who's been severely insulin resistant, and it's also huge psychology to not eat from noon on. That's where a lot of our social time comes from. That's where a lot of our food rituals come from. And if you tell somebody they can't do that, it's usually a battle. We don't need to do that. We got plenty of other battles to fight. All right, so the last phase I just want to point out one other thing here is that the baseline metabolisms, you live here. The beginner phase, that 1 through 4, that's that first 4 to 6 weeks of a ketogenic diet. When we get down to stressing metabolisms, this is keto continuum 9 through 12. And again, the psychology of this phase is really important. This is a place where I really do like my patients to be using a blood meter. I want them measuring their Dr. Boz ratio. I want them measuring, did the fast get you the results that we need? And if there's one reason that I unabashedly say the best lecture I've ever given is at the end of that online course. It's about fasting. It's about what happens on a ketogenic diet when you fast versus what happens when you're insulin resistant and you fast, and what happens to an athlete in their 20s when they fast. And it's my favorite lecture. It really does summarize, why do I do this every week? Why do I fast every week? And I measure my autophagy ratio. I don't like it. It's not fun, but it really is good for me, and the example for my patients is just something I feel very called to do. So again, we don't want you doing this every day. I've had people try to do a fast every 48 hours, odd, one meal every other day. But that's a really big stress. You do need a healthy support system. Usually a ketone buddy doing it with you is important. You'll see that I fast using one of these stressing metabolisms once a week. I start on the Sunday show. I usually go until I get a Dr. Boz ratio of 40. I used to use the clock, and in this worksheet, I have used the overview of having a stressing metabolism, or stressing your metabolism, and using the clock as your measurement of fasting. because it is this simple way to say, this is the place I begin to sort, to say how well can you do this. Each of these fasts have a skill set with them. That first fast of 36 hours seems daunting to people the first time they do it. I will recommend to remember when you do a 36-hour fast, make sure you're clipping the coupon that the 16 hours of sleep, that means you have 2 sleep cycles in that 36 hours. That's how you get to 36 hours. So you have supper normally and you don't eat after supper. You go to bed, you wake up the next morning, and mentally you are just fasting for that day. You are going to get your head to bed that night without anything but salt and black water. If it's your first fast, I let my patients have bone broth then. I really recommend ketones in a can at that point. If they've been doing MCT oil, I actually don't like them to do MCT when they're fasting. I just like them to do the ketones in a can. I really want their liver making as much of the ketones as possible from their fat cells. And that requires as few calories as possible. So I say, yep, you can have ketones in a can for that. You can have ketones in a capsule for that. And as you can see on this fast, 40 minutes ago, I took a few capsules. But for the most part, we want you having nothing but salt, black coffee, tea, water. And the better you get at fasting, it is a skill. It is a skill to say no. It's not just about not eating. It's what do you do when you're not eating, which sounds obvious, except it's weird. The first couple of them, you're like, oh my goodness, I just went 36 hours without food. It's like an identity shift. A couple warnings I do like to put on there here is to show you that begin the fast after the evening meal. And this is a danger. If you take blood pressure medicines or if you take blood sugar lowering meds, please walk with your doctor on this. You want to be in step with what they advise, and if somebody's watching you. Do not hop into a 36-hour fast if you're on those medications and you haven't talked to your doctor. All right, so then 36-hour meal. This is still a hard one for me. Not so much with 36, but definitely at 48, and my goodness, at 72, I'm terrible at this, is I have a celebration meal when I'm done with my fast. I go from fasting to feasting, and I do it a lot. As much as I tell myself, I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to have a can of sardines, I'm going to have some Braunschweiger, and I'm going to go on with my life. Dang, I really struggle. By the time you get the third day without food, and I've gone like 7 days. I've had a couple of times where I pushed, and when I audio recorded the book, I fasted for 7.5 days, and it does change your measuring tool, but the feast afterwards, man, I struggle with that one. As you work through this, your 48-hour fast and 72-hour fast have different options. I will tell you that this is the one that I'm working on right now. When the timing is right, stress your metabolism with 8 consecutive weeks of a 72-hour fast. And that is really where I have cleaned up people who, when they're ready, and these are the folks that write in and say, Dr. Boz, I've been on a ketogenic diet for 1.5 years. I've been stalled. I feel really good. I just can't seem to get to the next level. I've done a few 36-hour fasts. I push them, and I select them pretty carefully of who I tell to do this, but say you need consecutive, at least 6 weeks of 72-hour fasting once a week. And what happens during those 72-hour fasts is they go from dabbling in fasting to really honing the skill of what it looks like to not eat for 3 days. Now, you cannot even talk about that when you are in keto continuum number 2 or 3 or 4. Your body isn't ready for that. And the number of people that go from 2 meals a day and then they hop down to a 36-hour fast only to say, geez, I didn't feel very good, or I felt fine, but I just didn't have the energy you said I was going to have. What I contend is they don't know what it feels to feel fine yet. Those fat-based hormones weren't high enough to support a fast. So I know this is a lot to go through, but I really show you this because the map of where you're going with the ketogenic diet does matter. It is not a race to the bottom. It is not that everybody needs to poke their finger like I do. No, not everybody should be fasting. There is a season for this. And if your goal is to improve your health to the point where your immune system works better, you take care of a cancer like Grandma Rose did. Remember, she was 9 months into that story before she did the fast of a lifetime, which lasted 40 days. And it did save her life. It was amazing. And had we not been practicing a ketogenic diet, had her fat-based hormones not been in good rhythm, she would not have survived. She would not have had that outcome. As I write this next book and as I get to the last few chapters here, talking about a patient who's going through this keto continuum and where he gets stalled and where he finds benefit and where he kind of struggles with his own, mental demons for can he do this? It really shows you what I've learned in the last 5 years about a ketogenic diet, how it fits in with the chronic illnesses of many of my patients, and then how do I march through and advance them slowly. This past week, I had a couple other people saying my family member has cancer. I read your book, we're going to try and fast for 40 days. And I'm like, stop, do not do that. You are taking an insulin-resistant cancer patient on chemo. Fasting them for 40 days is not the right answer. They have got to be in a ketogenic state for a period of time before you can really push that, unless they're under strict medical supervision. When you look at the trials for people like that are being treated for brain tumors or some of the even like pancreatic cancers that they're trying to use a ketogenic state to help that chemotherapy work better, they are checked incessantly. They're in the hospital on these things. So if your loved one has cancer and you want to use the ketogenic diet, the right answer is you do the ketogenic diet. You walk with them and you start at step 1, step 2, step 3. That online course shows you where do people fall apart, where do they not understand what's happening in their body, and how can you prevent that. It is super easy, but you got to have it in the sequence and in the timing for those people who really need it. All right, I hope that does show you why I wanted you to see the path of what I use in my practice, but also in life for coaching people on the ketogenic diet. I am going to go back here and go here and just let you know that I am going to check my numbers one more time. So again, I've got my, it's been about 40 minutes since I had my ketones in a capsule. I took 4 of them. I will tell you that it takes about 8 capsules, 8 to 10 capsules to equal a scoop of this. It takes about 10 to 12 capsules to equal a scoop of this. So again, the best buy is the powder. When you just buy the capsules, they're really big capsules, so we put as much powder in them as possible, but it still takes a lot of capsules to equal a scoop of that ketone powder. All right, so I'm going to prick my finger again. And I have my ketones. That's just the code. It's not 275, but I want you to see that it is dripping, that little flashing little drip there, because it's ready. So purple strip, 10 seconds is what it takes to measure the ketones. This is my glucose strip, and you can see it's blinking. And so let's see, what did the stress of? So we have ketones going up to 2.1 and glucose at 87. I can't remember what the glucose was at the beginning, but I do remember the ketones were like 1.6 or something like that. I can't remember that either. All right, so it did go up is what I'm showing you. The ketones went up. I think the glucose went up too, if I remember right. So again, more fuel being produced, but the supplement of those capsules did raise the ketones a little bit. Again, the biggest platform for my ketones are the ones made in my liver. It's because I am keto adapted. I do practice this. I am super excited that my favorite supplement of both ketones and C8C10 MCT in one powder are back on Amazon. Whew. And I actually don't have a single stinking bag of this at my house. I sent them all to Amazon. So if I want to get that supplement, I have to order it for myself. How embarrassing. All right, well, that's it. That's the Dr. Boz Show. I hope you really enjoyed this show looking at what's the map that I use in a ketogenic diet. I am going to finish out my final hours of a 72-hour, actually it'll be a little longer than a 72-hour fast, so I'll be at 72 hours tomorrow night, and then another 12 will put me like 90 hours, somewhere closer to 90 before I probably quit. So maybe it'll be 96 hours, maybe I'll make it that long. You can follow me on Instagram and see how long I make it. I do really appreciate those of you tuning in, sharing all of those experiences, especially those of you that are in the Neurons group. Once you sign up for that online class, it's my favorite place to go in and check, because these folks have all been through the class of the ketogenic, consistently keto, and they ask questions that they're very fun for me to answer. They are so educated because they've gone through the course, and it's one of the first places that I absolutely enjoy answering them, because it's at a much higher level of communication. But that's a part of being that online class, and thank you for all of you that have joined in and asked me those good questions. I will be much better about my presence on social media when the book is written. All right, I am going to answer one more question. I had a patient say, how is Grandma Rose? So Grandma Rose, yes, is my mom, and this is a picture of her. I don't know if you can see her cute little chubby cheeks there at the beginning of the ketogenic diet, and this is what it looked like when she was about a year later, cancer-free, chemo-free, and an incredible story of her. But as I said earlier in the show, we buried her husband, my dad, 6 weeks ago, and she is definitely grieving but doing well. Thank you, everyone who put a sponsor towards the memorial for my dad, and those of you that prayed for my mom, my family, and just how heavy it is to bury a parent. So thanks for the grace for all of you that have been waiting for me to reply to a lot of those questions, and knowing that I'm doing the best I can. So we will see you next Sunday. We are the Dr. Boz Show, improving your health one ketone at a time. See you next week, everybody.